Alright, I'm now about to install the cylinder heads on my LS2 specification iron block engine, and I've already cleaned these cylinder heads, washed them down with a shout, and rinsed them off with water, and kind of let them air dry. I'm not in my shop, so I don't have my air compressor to blow them off, so I just had to let the sun do its job and heat them up and dry them off. So what I did before I did that, I replaced the valve springs with what's called Ls6 Valve Springs, and that is a Summit Racing part number. It's Summit Racing part number 174002. And I did that because I'm using the LS2 cam, and it's lifts, I think it's 0.525 lift, which I think is a little bit higher than a factory lift cam on a 5.3. These heads are what's called 799 heads. That's your part number. And these are the Ls6 Corvette heads that were started using around 2004. They are known for what's called the D port. This bottom edge of the exhaust is flat, and supposed the 862s and 706s are round. The port is round. These are more flattened, and that's supposed to be a higher flowing head. So about to install these cylinder heads and on my LS2 block, and I need to hurry and do it before this wind gets up and blows dirt and stuff in here. So the head gaskets I'm using are genuine GM, and they're part number 125-89227. These are 6 liter, you can see it says 6 liter right there, 6 liter cylinder heads. I use GM when it comes to cylinder head gaskets because I just don't trust any of the other manufacturers. I'm assuming GM put a lot of research into this, and for the marginal increase in cost, they're about $10 more expensive than say Velcro. It's worth the extra peace of mind using GM head gaskets. All right, I've got the head gasket laid out on the block, and it just does meet the bore. So anyway, these gaskets can apparently be used on either side because both sides have a, let's see here. At first I had it backwards, but yeah, so they can be flipped over and put on either side. By the way, you have your locating dowels here in the corners. That's what keeps the head gasket and the head in place while you're bolting it down and center and gets it aligned properly. So there's a front marking on the gasket, and it needs to go towards the front of the engine. And like I say, there's only one part number, so each gasket can be used on either side of the engine. Now the gasket's in place. I'm going to get the cylinder head and lower it in place and start putting the bolts in. Alright, the head is now laid in place on top of the gasket. By the way, you don't use any sealants or any kind of dressing on the gasket. It's already got these rubberized seals around all the ports and around all the stuff you need to worry about. So no need to use sealant of any kind. Put them on dry and then set the cylinder head on dry. The cylinder head is now laid on top of the engine, and we'll have to put the bolts in and torque them down. For bolts, this is a 2002-2001 6 liter block. So I'm using the ES72173 bolts, Velcro, and these are what's called first design, and I believe that means that the first design means that there's only, I'll take that back. The first design means there's 3 different size bolts. You got longs, medium, and short. The second design, I believe, only has two lengths of bolts, and it has something to do with the depth of the threads down in the holes in the block. And I believe the medium bolts go here and here. The short ones go across the top, and then the bottom ones, or all the rest of them, go everywhere else. So about to put the bolts in and torque them down. By the way, you don't need to use any oil. As you can see, they pull the bolts off the bottom. So the bolts already have sealant on the threads. No need to use this kind of lubricant too. No need to use lubricant on there. And then there's I don't see anything on the head itself, but these are torqued to angle, so it doesn't matter whether there's a higher friction under the head or not, because you're torquing to an angle instead of a torque value. The angle eliminates the need for any kind of lubricant on the head or the threads. So now I'm about to put the bolts in and torque them down. So here's how you know the medium bolts go in these corner holes here. If you try to put a long bolt in here, it won't go very far. It stops right there. Whereas the rest of the long bolts, you can see how they went down further down in the head. So long bolts do not go in the corners. The corners here or right there. Only the medium bolts do. All right, so I've got just about all the bolts in. Let's see, where did I miss one? This one goes here. Then put the two medium ones in, and then the shorter ones, and then torque them and angle torque them down. Is what I meant to say. One thing I was hesitant about on this engine was I didn't know if I took the motor out with the heads already off of it, and it was much easier to get to these back bolts with the heads off, or with the intake heads off, obviously. And was concerned about putting the heads on now before I put it back in the car. And I'm putting the heads on now because that gives me more precise control over the torque, the ability to torque these heads down. It's much more difficult to do an angle torque procedure inside the truck, leaning over this truck. But if you look, there's a bolt here and nothing over here. And that head here does not really interfere with getting access to that bolt or that bolt. This bolt down here is on the side. I got to that one, and I got to that one from underneath the truck. So putting the heads on is not going to hinder me in the least bit putting this engine back together or back in the truck and bolt it to the transmission. So I'm going to go ahead and put the heads on it now. All right, so I'm about to torque down the bolts, and I'll let you know how that process went. Okay, in trying to tighten down these bolts, you'll find that this thread sealer gets really gummy and sticky. So these bolts are very hard to turn. That's why you can't use a standard torque setting to tighten these in. You've got to use the angle method. And these are really hard to turn. I'm having to put quite a bit of strength to get them to go down. So just wanted to make you aware of that. So about to torque down, or at least put all the longest bolts in snug, and then get the others installed, and then torque them all down. All right, I now have all the bolts torqued down to the first pass torque, which is 22 foot-pounds. All bolts it's just the initial pass to get them seated. It's 22 foot-pounds, and then I went ahead and torqued these upper bolts here, right here. Got glare on the camera. So these upper bolts get torqued to 22 foot-pounds also. So I went ahead and torqued them down now to 22 foot-pounds. I'm now about to continue with the torquing of the rest of the bolts to the final torque, which is angle torque, not a torque value. And I believe the numbering is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Let me go over that again. Start here at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And you torque them, you do it all in one motion. Torque it all the way to all the bolts except these two corner ones get 90 degrees of extra torque, and the ones on the end get 50. That's 50, that's 50. All the rest of them here get 90 degrees. So I'm not going to show you that. I've got other videos where I show how to use an angle. This is an angle torque meter. And basically you put this against the stop, zero your pointer, rotate the outer dial to where it reads 0 right before you start torquing. Take up any slack, make sure it's still on 0, and then run it, and then twist until the pointer points to 90 degrees. It's really not that hard to do. I've got other videos showing on Mer Cruiser V6s how to do that. So about to torque these bolts down, and the driver's side head will be installed. Okay, the driver's side cylinder head is now on. All bolts are torqued down properly. Like again, all except that bolt and that bolt are torqued to a 90-degree torque angle. The ones on the ends are torqued to 50 degrees. And then these smaller 8mm bolts at the top are 22 foot-pounds, and that's in first pass, and that's all. So this is now torqued down, and now ready to put the other side on. They warned that you have to do this in one motion. If you mess up and stretch the bolt and lose track of where you are, the bolt's trash. You should not reuse it. These are torque to yield bolts, which means they're supposed to be one-time use only. And once they're stretched, you have to have a reference point of 0 stretch. Once you stretch them, you will not know where you will not know the strength of the bolt anymore. So you have to reuse a new bolt. That's why you need to do it all in one motion and do it right the first time, one and only time. All right, I'm not going to video the other side. It'll be identical to this side. I'm going to get this thing put together and then seal it up.